Welcome to Your Inspired Journey. I'm Carla Andrews, and I have the wonderful pleasure of introducing Ananda de Jager. She is a phenomenal author, a poet, and someone who helps those who are looking to be inspired in regards to how they take their journey. Welcome, Ananda. I can't wait to hear about you, your journey, your message through your poetry.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm super happy to be here.
I'm glad because I know that right before we started, our conversation here, you were sharing some great ways of how you're an author. What led you to becoming an author?
Well, everything went quite fast actually. So I recovered from an eating disorder. And when I was recovering, I shared a lot of poems on Instagram from other people. And then I discovered that one of my friends had published a book with
Mm,
printing on demand, which is a way of publishing, meaning the book only gets printed when somebody actually orders it. And I thought, at one point I wanted to start writing myself, but I'm not really good at writing full stories. So I thought maybe poems are a way to express myself in a few sentences and to experience my emotions. And in the back of my mind, I thought if I write down my process, maybe
mm,
it can help others, because the poems that I shared from other people on my Instagram, they were received really well. So it took 6 months to write the poems, from July last year until December. And then I sent it to the publisher. It got validated in March, right before the lockdown. And then during lockdown, we finalized everything. And it's been about 3 months that it's published now.
wow. So you have to share with me. I mean, you mentioned that you had an eating disorder. I mean, how did you tell us about you? Tell us, how did you go through to get to the step of being an author? But you must have been going through some tough times, or something led you to becoming that author. What happened?
Looking back, I think I've always had problems with eating, meaning I never wanted to eat after 8 p.m. I had like my food rules. Whenever something happened in my life that I didn't want to deal with emotionally, I would start another diet. And then in 2017, I lost my period. So my relationship ended, and I was like, perfect time to diet and start working out. Um, and that worked really well, a little bit too well, I would say, because I lost a lot of weight. And 3 months passed, 6 months passed, and I didn't get my period back. I was always cold. I was food obsessed. I had all these food rules. And then at one point, I was like, okay, but I don't really want to live like this the rest of my life. And maybe if I want to have kids one day, I need to get a period. So I knew that something was off, but admitting that to yourself, it's
It's tough.
quite a big step.
Yeah.
um, so I was like, okay, maybe I can work on myself without gaining weight. So maybe I can work on my mindset and work on my patterns and loving myself more, but I can eat the same, work out the same. Well, that didn't work, but at least it was the first step into recovery. And then slowly my body came out of like the survival mode, because if you lose your period, it basically means like you're not feeding your body well enough to have
Mm,
all its functions. So it goes into survival mode. So slowly but surely, I started eating better, working out less, but all while focusing on releasing energetic blockages or looking at where my patterns came from. Like, why was I never feeling good enough? Why did I think
mm,
people liked me better when I was skinny? How could I start from a place of accepting myself and really being the person I meant to be, instead of always trying to be good enough for someone else or trying to change the way I am because I expect that other people would like me better that way, even
mm.
though that's all in my mind, right? Nobody ever said like, oh, if you lost 5 kilos, or I don't know what it is in LBS, then I would like you so much better. No, you don't say that to your friends neither. So why was I so tough on myself? So it was really
Isn't it
a,
something? Yeah, we could be
yeah,
critical, so critical of
you're your
ourselves.
own worst critic, really. often.
So when you said was it a doctor that mentioned to you that you're not having your cycle because of the way you're eating? I mean, how did you connect that being that because of the way you were not eating or eating you connected that to your cycle?
Um, well, I never went to a doctor, first of all, because I felt like if I go to a doctor, he's just going to tell me to eat more. And food is not the problem. It's I take out my emotions on food. That was the problem.
Mm,
And I read a lot online on Instagram, and I read that girls had gone to the doctor. And maybe there's different doctors, of course. It's different
mhm,
for
mhm,
everybody. Um, that would be like, oh, just go back on the pill. But I was like, that's not a real period, you know?
mhm,
So
mhm.
I just looked up online, and I had all the symptoms of amenorrhea and of an eating disorder. So I was like, one plus one is
So
two.
say that again. What was the disorder's name?
Amenorrhea, that's the
Oh,
absence of your period. And
mm,
then I also had all the symptoms of an eating disorder. You can
okay.
either call it an eating disorder. Some people, for identification, prefer to call it anorexia. But for me, that's still a very tough label,
Mhm,
which I've
mhm.
also been confronted with, of course. Um, but even if you don't have the typical look of someone that's anorexic, you could still have an eating disorder. You can
Mm.
still underfeed your body, or be food obsessed, or be always cold, or there's so many different forms of eating disorders or mental health issues. If you don't have food freedom, if you're always dieting, that's also a problem if it affects your life every day.
I love how you mentioned that food freedom. I'm going to turn it off. We're off for a second. Food freedom could be a great program for you. That's actually $1 million program. So just pay. I do branding, so I'm sharing that with you now. So maybe it's something that you can talk about that you have a program that a food is called food freedom that's gonna come, and of course from there you'll create it. But that's jackpot for you. Okay. All right.
Oh.
So share a little bit about when you mentioned you find yourself connecting all your emotions to eating. Like, what made you think of that? That's like was it something that happened when you were younger that had you connect to food? I mean, what happened, or where did you identify that? Okay, there's a connection here.
Ooh. That's a
What
tough
made you?
question. That's why I'm thinking.
Yeah,
I'm like, how did I?
take your time. Take your time.
Because
What made you think it
mm,
was like? Did someone say something to you
no, because I
about your?
know that when I eat less, I feel less. I
Mm,
think deep down, even if I didn't want to admit it to myself, deep down I knew it was not something that happened in my past. But I also think saw I had convinced myself that people would like me better if I was skinnier for some reason. And
mm,
I've also modeled. And in the modeling industry, even though
yeah.
I fully think my problems did not came from the modeling industry, I really think it's my own mental health problems, and maybe they got worse because of the modeling
Mm-hmm.
industry, but it's not the fault of the modeling industry. And I was talking to a friend this week, and I was like, when I was a model, everything would be solved by losing weight, because your agency would like you better if you had the measurements. Your casting directors would like you better if you had the measurements. You would like yourself better if you had the measurements. So everything was solved by having the measurements. And I was like,
Wow.
now in real life, I can't solve my problems by having the measurements, because it's not like if I fight with a friend and I have the measurements that they're like, oh, but now everything is fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So it
I
was it
think it
was
was
almost like the reaction. It's like you were seeking
confirmation.
this. Yeah, it was a reaction of like confirmation from others.
Yeah,
It's a
like
seek. It
feeling
was
good enough.
yeah, interesting, huh?
Yeah, it's still, even now when you do this podcast, or you talk to people about your process, you still discover new things all the time. Or
Mm-hmm.
even things come in your head like, oh yeah, I used to do that too. That's crazy. It's sometimes it's like you make the past better than it was. And then sometimes these things pop up that are like, yeah, but look, wait a second. There was actually also things that weren't so good.
Mm-hmm.